Chapter 1: A Haunting in Willow Creek. Officer Michael Thompson had been a part of the Willow Creek police force for 7 years. He genuinely loved his job. Living and working in a small New England town meant he knew most people by name. Though only 33, he was an old-fashioned kind of cop. Friendly, caring, and always ready to lend a hand. The people of Willow Creek liked Officer Thompson. Crime wasn't a major issue at the local station, so the days usually passed by slowly. While other officers might crave the action of a big city, Michael cherished being a part of a close-knit community. The village itself was a picturesque place to live. The central church had been erected in 1782, and many of the colonial houses had stood for centuries. Even the local pub, the Black Cat Tavern, was steeped in history. On the edge of town, a river meandered through fields and forests, creating scenes that looked like paintings on summer evenings. However, there was little for young people to do, and bored teenagers often found themselves in minor trouble. Most of the problems Michael dealt with were caused by them: loud music, graffiti, and general misbehavior. Usually, a simple talk with the kids and their parents was enough to resolve things. He rarely had to bring anyone to the station. In his 7 years, he had only arrested 5 people, but he had successfully found and returned 11 lost dogs to their homes. Some might find this life dull, but Michael was content. It was the middle of summer. The sun had set and the hour was late. Michael was at the police station working the night shift. For a few hours, he'd been buried in paperwork. Even a small town station had its share of bureaucracy. He'd also had some coffee and read the local paper. The station's cat, Harriet, was curled up on his knee, purring contentedly. "Sorry, Harriet," Michael said. "You're going to have to move. I need another coffee." He gently tried to nudge the plump tabby cat off his lap, but she resisted. Suddenly, the phone rang. That's odd, Michael thought. No one ever called this late unless something was seriously wrong. He picked up the receiver. Willow Creek Police Station. "Oh, Michael," said a voice he recognized. It was Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. "I'm so sorry it's so late," she said, "but there's something going on in the cemetery." Michael sighed internally. Every so often, a group of teenagers would gather at the Willow Creek Cemetery, dressed in black, lighting candles and playing loud music. "Is it those kids again?" Michael asked. "Maybe," Mrs. Gable replied. "I can't sleep. It upsets me that they go there. My parents' and grandparents' graves are in that cemetery." "Of course," said Michael. "I'll head over right away. Maybe then you can get some rest." About 10 minutes later, Michael parked his patrol car at the cemetery gates. He could hear music, and the yellow glow of candles showed him where the teenagers were. He got out of the car, switching on his flashlight. Next to the gates stood a very old, derelict house. It had once been home to the cemetery caretaker, but the building had been abandoned for 20 years. Some of its windows were shattered and climbing vines had crept over the structure, even pushing through the broken panes. 2 centuries ago, it might have been charming, but now it looked like something out of a horror movie. No one ever went inside. Birds had made their nests in the empty rooms. Using his flashlight to illuminate the path, Michael walked towards the teenagers. Numerous candles flickered on the gravestones. There was loud music, and some of the teens were standing in a circle, chanting. When Michael emerged from the darkness, he startled them. A girl nearly screamed. "Sorry," he said to her. "It's only me. Are you trying to summon a ghost?" "It's none of your business," a tall boy retorted. He stepped forward into the flashlight's beam. Michael recognized him. His name was Alex Peterson. He was 17, and his parents owned the town bakery. "It is my business," Michael replied calmly. "This is a cemetery. It's an important part of our community, and having a party here is disrespectful." The girl who had almost screamed approached Michael. "We can do whatever we want," she said, trying to sound brave after her initial fright. Michael recognized her now as Katie Miller. She was only 14 and should have been at home in bed. "What exactly are you doing?" Michael asked. "Trying to make contact with witches." I don't think you'll have much luck tonight. Willow Creek was in a part of Massachusetts with a history tied to the famous witch trials. In the late 17th century, women and men from the region had been arrested for witchcraft. Legends told of witches speaking to demonic animals and casting spells that made people sick, killed livestock, and spoiled crops. The accused were imprisoned and many were executed. Now, historians viewed them as scapegoats, but the stories endured, bringing tourists to the area. People could buy witch-themed souvenirs, and every Halloween, crowds would walk up Willow Ridge in the dark. Willow Creek had its own local legends. Some were about the cemetery itself, which was built on the grounds of an even older church. Stories claimed that witches used to meet where the old church once stood, dancing around bonfires and communing with dark forces. The ghost of a witch named Agnes Reed was said to haunt the graveyard. Some locals even claimed the old caretaker's house was haunted, reporting strange noises and lights late at night. Michael shined his flashlight around. "Time to go," he told the kids, "before the ghost of Agnes Reed actually shows up. Then you'll all be running home screaming. You can't stop us," Alex said defiantly. "We'll just come back. The more this town hates us, the happier we are." "I'm sorry you feel that way," Michael said. He understood their frustration. There was nothing for teenagers to do in Willow Creek. He had suggested youth discos at the church hall, but the older villagers worried about noise and alcohol. Yet, having teenagers roaming the streets at night was a bigger problem. After the kids had left, Michael looked around the graveyard. Thankfully, there was no new graffiti on the gravestones tonight. A few years ago, there had been a problem with vandalism, with some headstones even being smashed. Alex and his friends were angry and bored, but Michael didn't think they were capable of something that malicious. He decided to keep an eye on them anyway. A few days later, Michael was on a normal afternoon shift. He preferred working during the day when there was more to do. He could walk through the village, chat with people, and stop by the shops. Other officers were in and out of the station, and even Harriet the cat preferred the daytime, sunbathing on the station's front step. Mr. Henderson, an elderly man, had stopped by to give Michael some green beans from his garden. He was always bringing in fresh vegetables. Michael was admiring the beans when his cell phone rang. "I'll just get that," Michael said to Mr. Henderson. The call was from his boss, Chief Inspector Davis, whose office was in the nearby city. "We just heard from the Lockwood Gallery," the chief inspector said. "They called the National Emergency Line. Can you get over there, Thompson? They've been robbed." Michael flipped on his sirens as he drove quickly through the village. As he drove, he thought about the gallery. He hadn't been there in over 3 years, but he used to go often. That was because his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, loved art. Sarah had left for a job in Boston about 3 years ago, working in art restoration. After much thought, she had decided to take it. Michael couldn't get a job with the police in a big city like Boston, and he didn't want to stop being a cop. So he stayed in Willow Creek, and Sarah moved on. The Lockwood Gallery was just outside the village, housed in a beautiful 18th century mansion. It was named after the family that had built it. It took Michael about 10 minutes to get there. When he arrived, 2 elderly women rushed to meet him at the door. They both looked distraught and started speaking at once. "Oh, officer, thank goodness you're here," one of the women exclaimed. "I'm Joan Hayes. I work here." "We don't know how it happened," the other woman said simultaneously, "but it's all my fault." "No, Laura, of course it's not your fault," said Joan. "Yes, it is," Laura exclaimed. "I'm so angry with myself." Michael held up his hands. "Let's all stay calm," he said gently. "We'll go inside, and you can tell me everything. Then we'll start looking for the thief." Chapter 2: A Life in Paint. Once inside, Michael took out his notebook. "Now, tell me what happened." "No one had come to visit for over 2 hours," said Joan Hayes. "It was a very slow day." Laura Bingley sat down behind the reception desk. "I'm afraid I left the reception area," she confessed. "Every year, we have a competition for local artists. People from all over the state send in their paintings. This morning, some new entries arrived, and I was so excited. I wanted to see them, even though it's not my job to unpack them. I went upstairs to take a look. While I was gone, someone came in and stole one of our paintings. So it's all my fault. Michael scanned the room. Don't you have security cameras? He asked. No, Joan replied. It would cost a lot of money. We never imagined someone would steal from the Lockwood Gallery. And neither of you saw anyone? Michael asked. No, both women replied in unison. We didn't see or hear a thing, said Laura. Let's have a look at where the painting was hanging, Michael suggested. The women led him into one of the gallery's smaller rooms. Unlike modern galleries with their vast white spaces, the Lockwood Gallery was intimate. The building had many small rooms and halls with walls covered in beautiful old wood paneling and small windows. Visitors felt as though they were stepping back in time. Paintings adorned all the walls, but in one spot, there was a conspicuous empty space. It was here, said Joan. It was called Summer. Michael took out his phone. I'm going to call the crime scene unit, he told them. Someone will come to check for fingerprints. I'll also need a photograph of the painting, please. It will help in the investigation. I'll go find one, said Laura. The artist was Lockwood, of course. The Lockwood Gallery was small and not nationally prominent, but it held the largest collection of Tristan Lockwood's paintings in the country. Lockwood was a famous painter from the 1940s and 50s who had lived near Willow Creek for many years. When he died in the 1980s, many of his best works were donated to the gallery. People came from all over the United States to see them. Laura returned and handed a large photograph to Michael. Here it is, she said. Summer. It's a wonderful picture, isn't it? Michael looked at it. It depicted a beautiful summer scene. In the background, the sun glistened on a river, surrounded by green fields and trees. In the foreground, under a large tree, sat a young woman. She wore an old-fashioned yellow dress and a wide-brimmed hat. This was painted in 1951, Laura said. Looking at it makes me feel so calm. It almost feels like you're really there. It's lovely, said Michael. I'll need to keep this photograph for our investigation. Is that all right? Of course, said Laura. We'll do whatever we can to help. Back in his car, Michael phoned his boss, Chief Inspector Davis. He relayed all the information he had. The inspector was clearly busy. Michael could tell he wasn't particularly interested in a stolen painting from a village gallery. The city had more crime than its police force could handle. They should have had security cameras, Davis grumbled. He told Michael to contact the Art Loss Register, an international database of stolen or lost art. If a museum or wealthy collector wanted to buy a piece, they could check the register to see if it was stolen. If it was, they could alert the police, potentially leading to the thief's capture. Finding stolen art was notoriously difficult. Can you handle this, Thompson? Davis asked. I don't have another officer to send down there right now. It's a pain we have to send a crime scene officer just for some fingerprints. I still think it's a good idea, Michael said. The inspector was often in a bad mood, and Michael was glad he didn't have to work in the city. You know we're on high alert, don't you? Davis continued. We might have to send officers to Boston or New York at any moment. You too, officer. I know, Michael replied. Leave it all to me, Inspector. I'll send you my reports. After the call ended, Michael opened the car window and took a deep breath of fresh air. He looked at the photograph of Summer again. The young woman in the picture was very pretty, with long, wavy blonde hair. She gazed out across the fields. Michael wondered if she had been a real person or a product of the painter's imagination. Back at the station, Michael immediately contacted the Art Loss Register and provided them with the details of the stolen painting. Then he went out to interview the villagers, hoping someone had noticed something unusual. Meanwhile, the crime scene officer was examining the gallery. If any fingerprints were found, they would be run through the police database. Over the next 2 days, Michael was consumed by the case. He put up posters about the robbery, asking anyone with information to call the police. He went from house to house, asking if anyone had seen a stranger in the village. A few tourists had been around, but no one had been acting suspiciously. He made copies of the summer photograph and distributed them to art shops and auction houses in the region, even sending copies to colleagues in Boston and New York. At the station, he pinned the photo to the wall. He began to feel as though he wasn't just trying to find a stolen painting. He was trying to find the beautiful woman in it. It felt profoundly important to return her to the gallery. After a few days, the other officers started to joke about Michael's obsession. He would stare at the picture 100 times a day. "Have you fallen in love?" some of them teased. Michael no longer had time for his usual chats with the villagers. Even Harriet the cat seemed annoyed. He was too busy hunting for the painting to play with her anymore. On Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. It was exactly 5 days since Summer had been stolen. Every time the phone rang, Michael hoped it was news about the painting. It was Joan Hayes from the gallery. "Something terrible has happened," she exclaimed. "Laura has been taken to the hospital. Another painting was stolen, and this time, the thief pushed Laura down the stairs. She's unconscious." After rushing to the gallery to assess the crime scene, Michael went to the hospital with Joan. They were both terrified for Laura. At her age, a fall like that could be devastating. She had hit her head badly and broken her leg. Joan couldn't stop crying as they waited. The doctor promised to call Michael with any updates. He needed to question Laura, but while she was unconscious, all he could do was wait. Meanwhile, he had to contact the art loss register again. The second stolen painting was another Lockwood, titled Evening in June. This one depicted a terrace outside a lovely old house. On a table were teacups, a teapot, and a large strawberry cake. Seated in one of the chairs was a woman. Michael recognized her as the same woman from Summer. This time, she wore a pretty purple dress and was reading a book. In the background, green hills were bathed in the light of the setting sun. Michael found it strange that both stolen paintings featured the same woman. There were many Lockwood pictures of landscapes or still lifes. Only a few featured her. Perhaps that was a clue. Who was she? Michael asked when he called Joan that night. "Don't you know?" asked Joan. "That's Sylvia." Sylvia and Tristan Lockwood were married in 1950. She was very beautiful and was his model for some of his paintings. "Maybe if we find out more about Sylvia Lockwood, it might give us a clue," Michael said. "Perhaps the thief wants to collect paintings of her." "Good idea," said Joan. "Maybe he's obsessed with her." "We have an archive at the gallery. It has a lot of information about Sylvia. You can look at it if you like." The next day, after his shift, Michael went back to the Lockwood Gallery. It was closed to the public, and plans were being made to install security cameras. Joan took Michael upstairs to a small office filled with filing cabinets. "This is the Lockwood Archive," Joan said. "It's full of photographs, letters, and papers about Tristan's and Sylvia's lives and work. Feel free to look through them." Joan made him a cup of coffee, gave him the keys to the gallery and the alarm code, and then left for the hospital to sit with Laura. Michael was alone. He didn't know where to begin. All he knew was that someone had a powerful reason for stealing paintings of Sylvia. First, he pulled open a file of photographs. There were many black and white images of Sylvia by herself. He knew it wasn't strictly part of the investigation, but he couldn't help but look. She was stunning, with big dark eyes and a radiant smile. He saw photos of her with Tristan Lockwood, the dates and places noted on the back. Honeymoon, Vermont, 1950. The couple looked blissfully happy. Next, he examined some old letters. There were bundles from Sylvia to Tristan. Michael started to read, and for over an hour, he was transported to another world. It felt as if Sylvia were writing to him. He put those down and picked up another set. These were all addressed to Sylvia from a man named Nigel Vance, dated from 1941 to 1944 and sent from France. Vance had been a soldier in World War II. He wrote about his fear, about fallen comrades, but also about parties and friends. Every letter began with "My darling Sylvia." It was clear he had been deeply in love with her. Michael took out his notebook and wrote down Nigel's name. He might still be alive. He had been in the archive for hours. Before he left, he opened the photo cabinet again. There was one picture he wanted to see it again. It showed Sylvia sitting on a beach, wearing a sun hat and a white dress. She held a small book, but she had looked up from her reading to gaze at the camera. Instead of smiling, she looked serious, as if she were looking right at him. Before he could stop himself, he picked up the photo and slipped it into his pocket. He had never stolen anything in his life. Now he was a thief, just like the person who had taken the paintings. On his way home, driving past the cemetery, he worried the teenagers might be there again. Suddenly, he saw a flicker of light, like a candle or a flashlight, moving among the graves. "Those kids," Michael muttered. He stopped the car and went into the cemetery. The light vanished. He listened but heard nothing. He walked among the graves, which looked eerie in the dark. Suddenly, he got angry, assuming the teenagers were hiding from him. He switched off his flashlight and waited. Just as a cloud covered the moon, plunging everything into darkness, he saw a small light near the old caretaker's house. There was someone there. He switched his flashlight back on, shining it towards the empty house. "Hello," he called out. The light immediately disappeared. He walked closer. "Police, it's Officer Thompson. What are you doing?" When he reached the house, he shined his light all around. No one was there. However, a strange symbol had been painted on the front door in yellow paint. 3 stars inside a circle. The door was locked. He shined his light through the windows into the empty, web-covered rooms. "Whoever you are," Michael said into the empty air, "you should go home." Suddenly, he heard a ghostly laugh. He couldn't tell if it was a man's or a woman's voice. Before he could turn, there was a sharp pain in his head, and the world went black as he fell to the ground. Chapter 3: The Man Who Knew Sylvia. When Michael finally opened his eyes, his clothes were damp from the dew. He put a hand to his head and saw dark blood on his fingers when he pulled it away. His head throbbed, and he felt nauseous. His flashlight lay on the ground, broken. The best thing to do was call his boss and then go to the hospital. He staggered back to his car and drove home. Early the next morning, Michael went to the station and wrote a report about the incident in the graveyard. His head still hurt, but he didn't want to waste the day at a clinic. He called the hospital to check on Laura. She was still unconscious. Then he called the parents of Alex and the other teenagers, asking them to bring the kids down to the station. If Alex had hit him, he was in serious trouble. Next, Michael searched the internet for Nigel Vance. He discovered that Vance had also been an artist, a sculptor, though not as famous as Lockwood. Vance now lived in a village only 20 miles from Willow Creek. He was 85 years old and apparently very wealthy. Michael considered the facts. Vance lived nearby, knew about art, was in love with Sylvia, and was old but could still have pushed another elderly person. He decided to pay Nigel Vance a visit. At lunchtime, Michael drove to the nearby village. Vance's house was a large mansion hidden behind a thicket of trees. Michael parked and walked up the steps to the big front door. An elderly woman answered. "Mrs. Vance?" Michael asked. "No, I'm the housekeeper," she said, eyeing his uniform with displeasure. "I'd like to see Mr. Vance, please." "You'd better come in," she said gruffly. She led him into a large hall and told him to wait. Michael sat down, observing a large, modern sculpture in the corner. Soon, the housekeeper returned. "You can see Mr. Vance now. He's in the living room." Nigel Vance sat in a large armchair. He didn't look 85. His bright blue eyes were full of intelligence and energy. "I apologize for my housekeeper," Vance said. "She isn't very fond of visitors." Michael's eyes were drawn to a painting above the fireplace. He immediately recognized the subject. "That's a Lockwood," he exclaimed. "Yes," Vance said. "It's called Young Woman with Flowers. Tristan gave it to me." The painting showed Sylvia holding a vibrant bouquet of flowers. Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. "How can I help you?" Vance asked. Michael finally looked away from the painting. I'm Officer Thompson from the Willow Creek Police. I'm investigating the robberies at the Lockwood Gallery. Of course, Vance replied. I heard. A terrible business. And poor Laura Bingley is in the hospital. Someone wanted those pictures very badly, Michael said, watching Vance's reaction. Badly enough to nearly kill an elderly woman. Both paintings were of Sylvia. I think we should look for someone who was obsessed with her. Vance's eyes twinkled. So you've come to question me, he said with a small smile. Good detective work, officer. It's true. I was in love with Sylvia. We grew up together. I met Tristan Lockwood at art school, and Sylvia would model for both of us. Then the war started. I went to fight, but Tristan couldn't join because of a childhood illness. While I was in France, he and Sylvia fell in love. I wanted them to be happy, so we remained friends. What happened to them? Michael asked. They moved to America in the 1960s, Vance explained. Tristan had a show in New York. Then I read in the paper that he had died in 1986. I never saw Sylvia again. I tried to find her, but I had no luck. My paintings of Sylvia are all I have to remember those wonderful days. Would you break the law to get more of those memories? Michael asked directly. I'm sorry to disappoint you, said Vance, but I did not steal those paintings, so you won't mind if I look around your house? Michael asked. Yes, I do mind, officer, the old man replied, standing up. My house is private. If you don't have a search warrant, please leave. Michael knew he was right. He thanked Vance for his time and left, his suspicions now stronger than ever. Later that night, Michael decided to go back to the gallery archive. He was still captivated by Sylvia's story. Was she still alive somewhere? In his mind, she was forever the beautiful young woman in the paintings, the woman in the photo he carried in his wallet. Before he left, he called Joan Hayes to let her know. She told him a new security system was being installed in 2 days. She also had good news. Laura was out of danger. She could talk a little, but she had no memory of the robbery. Michael was relieved she was getting better. Chapter 4: The Ghost of the Past. By the time Michael reached the Lockwood Gallery, the sun had nearly set. He parked his car and was shocked by what he saw. The front of the building was covered in graffiti, the same yellow paint and symbols he'd seen on the caretaker's house. Then he saw the broken window. The hole was large enough for someone to climb through. On a shard of glass, he saw a smear of red blood. The thief had been cut. This was a vital DNA clue. He immediately called the city station for backup and a crime scene officer. Not wanting to wait outside, he used his key to enter the gallery. He stopped and listened. Silence. He followed a small trail of blood across the floor, up the stairs, and into another room. The trail stopped in front of an empty space on a wall where a painting had once hung. Suddenly, he heard a shout from downstairs. 2 other officers had arrived. Michael went down and explained the situation. Can you search the rest of the building? He asked an officer named Jenkins. I'm going to check the garden. The crime scene officer went to work. I'll get fingerprints and blood, he said, but I doubt we'll get a match. There were no matches last time. Michael took his flashlight and went outside. It was very dark. The woods bordering the gallery grounds were a perfect hiding place. He ventured into the trees, his flashlight beam cutting through the blackness. Suddenly, he heard a noise, then a voice. 2 people were hiding in the woods. He quietly called Officer Jenkins on his phone, and a minute later, Jenkins joined him. They switched off their lights and moved silently towards the voices. 2 figures dressed in black were hiding in some bushes. Michael recognized 2 of the young men from the cemetery. He shouted, and the boys jumped up and ran. Michael and Jenkins gave chase. One of the teenagers collided with a tree and fell. As Michael pulled him up, Jenkins caught the other. Jenkins searched the boy's backpack and found cans of yellow spray paint. At the station, the teenagers admitted to the graffiti but swore they had nothing to do with the break-in. They said they heard glass breaking and hid in the woods. Since neither boy had any cuts on them, Michael had to believe them. He let them go home with their parents. Back at his desk, he made a note to get the search warrant for Nigel Vance's home first thing in the morning. He needed to match Vance's DNA to the blood from the gallery. Suddenly, the phone rang. "Michael, it's Mrs. Gable," the woman said. "I'm so sorry to call again, but it's those kids in the cemetery." "Not again," Michael sighed. "I'll go immediately." Once more, Michael drove to the cemetery. Candles glowed among the graves. He saw the tall figure of Alex Peterson. As he approached, Alex stood up, looking furious. "Go away," Alex yelled. Before Michael could reply, a loud scream came from the caretaker's cottage. Michael and Alex both started running towards the old house. "It's Katie," Alex exclaimed. "She went in there on a dare. Can't you kids stay out of trouble?" Michael shouted as he ran. The door was still locked. "She went through a window," Alex said. They ran to the side of the building as Katie screamed again. Michael found the open window, shined his flashlight inside, and called her name. He saw her, terrified, rush towards him. He helped her climb out. She collapsed on the grass, sobbing. "It's the witch," she cried. "What did she look like?" Alex asked. "There are no witches," Michael said angrily. Then he saw a bright orange glow from inside the house. "I dropped my candle," Katie wailed. The old house was on fire. Michael pulled out his phone to call the fire department. But just as he was about to speak, he saw a figure moving inside the house. "There's someone in there," he exclaimed. "The witch," Katie cried. "I told you she's real." Michael tossed the phone to Alex, telling him to call for help, and then climbed through the window into the burning building. "Police," he called out. He ran through the smoke-filled rooms. The heat was intense. Then he saw her, a woman going up the stairs. He followed her, the orange glow of the fire lighting the way. At the top of the stairs, she stood still, looking at him. For a moment, he thought Katie was right. The woman had long, gray, matted hair and wore dirty old clothes. She looked ancient. "I'm Officer Thompson," he said. "I'm here to help you." She turned and ran down a corridor. Michael followed her into a bedroom. In the dim light, he saw the old woman trying to pick up several large, flat objects. When he got closer, he saw they were paintings. On every one, he recognized the face of Sylvia. The old woman looked at Michael and began to cry. "Please help me," she said. 2 months later, after his evening shift, Michael left the station and walked up the road to the local nursing home. Nigel Vance was waiting for him outside. It was their routine every Wednesday and Sunday. They went inside together. Sometimes Sylvia couldn't remember their names. She couldn't remember pushing Laura down the stairs or knocking Michael out in the graveyard. For weeks, she had been living in the old caretaker's cottage, stealing food to survive, and stealing the paintings from a place she vaguely remembered as her own. She couldn't be imprisoned for her crimes because she had advanced Alzheimer's disease. Instead, at the home, she had food, clothing, and proper care. She mostly remembered things that happened 60 years ago. Michael knew she had once been beautiful, though he couldn't see it in the frail old woman before him now. He and Nigel would sit and listen to her stories of wonderful summer evenings, and her eyes would glow with a flicker of happiness. "Her eyes are the one thing that hasn't changed," Michael said to Nigel, glancing at the worn photograph of Sylvia he still kept in his wallet. "They're still beautiful."